I've been saying for a long time that PlayStation's first-party exclusives have been in decline for a long time. It's what brought about the release on PC. It's what brought about the current era of no games on PlayStation 5. The illusion that Sony first-party titles are the cream of the crop, the best in the industry, that has been in complete free fall for a long time. And if you look at this convenient chart, you start to see what happened. After 2020, there was a steep, sharp decline, and not an insignificant one. People stopped taking PlayStation exclusives seriously after The Last of Us Part 2, which means that The Last of Us Part 2 has been such a monumental disaster, it completely destroyed Sony's business as a whole. They cannot produce any quality first-party exclusives without the majority of the demographic, myself included, thinking that Neil Druckmann could have his grubby paws on it somehow, that a Last of Us Part 2 could happen again, and that this game is not only a complete waste of everyone's time, but is in fact downright offensive and downright detrimental to society. Like, people do not talk enough about what a disaster The Last of Us Part 2 is, and it really does need to be said that the gaming industry rallied to give this game Game of the Year 2020. People said it was this monumental story, that it was this cutting edge title, that it was like far beyond, anything else in the industry. And meanwhile, in reality, Animal Crossing New Horizons mocked it. Okay. There were so many other Nintendo games that year that just completely mocked it. And what we're seeing is that the vast majority of the audience have moved on. What we're seeing is a situation that isn't possible to recover from, because Sony would need to put their best foot forward. They would need to actively come out and disavow The Last of Us Part 2. They would need to fire Neil Druckmann. They would need to restructure not only Naughty Dog, but every single one of their first-party subsidiaries. They would have to completely rethink their business model. And 6 years later, there is still a very stubborn refusal internally to admit that anything was wrong. And now we're on the verge of the release of a game, Heretic: The Last Prophet, which is probably going to be The Last of Us Part 2 on steroids. Okay, at least The Last of Us Part 2 had the illusion of being a sequel to a popular game that people love. Heretic is a new IP that seems to be built from the ground up to push Druckmann's insane worldview with like the feminist girl boss power fantasy, with like the race swaps, with this weird hot takes on religion, meaning exclusively Christianity. Like, we're going to see a lot of weird copes coming from this community over the next like 10, 20, 30 years. It's going to be phenomenal what the industry thinks, how the industry like tries to like damage control this disaster. And it very well might not be possible, okay? Because we saw them rally behind Destiny. Okay, we saw them like fight tooth and nail to legitimize the game and say it's good and say it's popular, and like what happened? Bungie still failed. Okay, like they tried their best to damage control Bungie, but in the end, it just resulted in like another epic failure. They tried to defend The Last of Us Part 2 and that failed. And if they try and do the same thing with like Heretic, a game that everyone already is anticipating is going to be complete slop, like what exactly are they going to do? Like the Heretic: The Last Prophet is probably going to cost like, hundreds of millions of dollars. It probably isn't going to see any kind of return. And it's probably going to spell the end for Naughty Dog as a studio, and by extension, PlayStation as a brand. Like the carefully constructed illusion in the 2000s that PlayStation exclusives were as good or better than Nintendo ones has completely collapsed, and there's no pretending anymore. Like hardcore PlayStation fans, they don't want to support The Last of Us Part 2. They hate The Last of Us Part 2 more than they hate Nintendo. And that's kind of crazy for like me of all people to say, but like it really is true how even the most hardcore of PlayStation cocksuckers on this platform will tell you that Neil Druckmann needs to go and that The Last of Us Part 2 is just a complete like failure of epic proportions, right? There's no gaslighting anybody anymore. The only people who glaze The Last of Us Part 2 today are all just like political activists who are all anxious to like legitimize Druckmann for pushing the agenda, for being like one of like the most progressive people in the industry. Like what we're seeing now is that Druckmann's career is on the fritz, right? This is probably going to be his last game before he gets the boot. This is probably going to tank the entire brand, the entire PlayStation brand. Like there has been a very noticeable decline in PlayStation, the relevancy of PlayStation exclusives. And The Last of Us Part 2, I think, is probably the defining example of go woke, go broke. Right? So many people have gaslit themselves into thinking that's not a real thing, that it could never possibly happen, that there is no like, pushback against woke culture or the woke agenda. And The Last of Us was like, this really well received popular TV show. It hasn't happened. It's been remarkable to see just how many people clown on The Last of Us Part 2 HBO, after Joel died. Okay. After like, the dumb shit that like Ellie's actress has done. And honestly, with her weird like potato face and like just the weirdness of it all. Like people have this mentality. They have this idea that The Last of Us Part 2 is like, it's this amazing thing. Like they really have this idea that was some like artsy AAA production that simply took a lot of risks and it was too high IQ for its audience. But it's actually a lot worse than that because people understand what The Last of Us Part 2 is trying to accomplish. And they hated it. Okay. The fans, I think, understand The Last of Us Part 2 quite a bit better than the critics and the shills do. And that's led to this realization that gamers can't trust PlayStation anymore. Like it's led to this culture where people are willing to like condemn major PlayStation studios for bowing to the agenda, like for kneeling, for just refusing to produce good video games. And it's really led to pretty much every first-party PlayStation exclusive since being highly suspect. And it's not going to go away anytime soon. If PlayStation is going to fix this, they're going to have to come out and publicly disavow woke culture, publicly disavow feminism, publicly like condemn like Pride Month. Like they're going to have to do a lot of things. But it's just not going to happen in the foreseeable future. Like this is going to keep continuing until there is absolutely nowhere for them to go but up.